They found the empty shackles at dawn, still warm from the body that had worn them through the night. The first time I heard the name Cyrus spoken with something other than pity or contempt, I was 12 years old. It was whispered in the darkness of our cabin like a prayer, like a promise, like the name of a God who had finally decided to pay attention to our suffering. What we all dreamed of but none dared attempt, Cyrus had done. He had run, and he had made it. My name is Eli, and this is the story of how I learned that freedom is not a place you run to, but a thing you fight for again and again until either you win or you die trying. Sprawling across 3,000 acres of the Tennessee hill country was the Drummond plantation, centered around an iron forge that burned day and night, turning ore into tools and chains and weapons for the Confederacy that would soon tear this nation apart. The year was 1855, and the air tasted of smoke and blood, and the particular desperation that comes from knowing you are living in the last days of something terrible that refuses to die. Master James Drummond owned 43 souls, though he called us hands, as if we were nothing more than extensions of his will, tools to be used and discarded when they broke. Different from the cotton and tobacco farms that dominated the Deep South was his plantation. Here we worked the forge and the mines, extracting iron ore from the red earth and transforming it in fires hot enough to melt stone. Brutal work it was, that killed men slowly through exhaustion and quickly through accident. In my short life, I had seen 3 men die. One crushed by falling rock in the mine, one burned when molten iron splashed across his chest. One simply worked until his heart gave out and he collapsed face first into the dirt. On this plantation, in a cabin that housed 6 families in a space meant for one, I was born. Bringing me into this world, my mother had died, and before I could form memories of his face, my father had been sold away. By the community I was raised, passed from lap to lap, fed by women who had milk to spare, taught by men who remembered what it meant to be human, even in a place designed to strip away our humanity. One of those men had been Cyrus. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with hands scarred from years of forge work and eyes that seemed to see through the present moment into some future only he could perceive. To Drummond's plantation, he had been brought 5 years before I was born. Sold down from Virginia after his previous master died, and the estate was liquidated. A wife named Ruth and 2 younger brothers, Marcus and Samuel, he left behind, all sold to different buyers, scattered like seeds on the wind. For 15 years, Cyrus worked the forge. The best iron worker Drummond had, he became capable of shaping metal with a precision that bordered on artistry. Highly Drummond valued him, which meant Cyrus was beaten less frequently than the rest of us, and given slightly larger rations. It also meant Drummond watched him more carefully, knowing that a valuable slave was also a valuable loss if he ran. But patient Cyrus was. He watched and he waited and he learned. The patrol routes of the slave catchers who rode the roads at night, he learned. Which dogs were used for tracking and how to confuse their sense of smell, he learned. The geography of Tennessee, the rivers and mountains and hidden paths that could carry a man north toward freedom, he learned. All of this he learned while never giving any sign that he was planning to use it. And then one night in October of 1854, he simply disappeared. At dawn the alarm went up when the overseer, a vicious man named Pritchard, discovered Cyrus's empty shackles in the slave quarters. Into a rage Drummond went, screaming about the money he had lost, about the ingratitude of slaves, about the need to make an example. In every direction he sent riders, hired professional slave catchers with their vicious dogs, offered a reward of $500 for Cyrus's return, dead or alive. But gone Cyrus was, vanished like smoke, and despite weeks of searching, no trace of him was ever found. In secret we mourned him, believing he had likely died in the attempt. Slim were the odds of a slave successfully reaching the north. Most were caught within days, returned to their masters for brutal punishment that served as a warning to others. Of exposure or starvation in the wilderness, those who evaded immediate capture often died. The few who made it to free states still had to worry about slave catchers, who operated with impunity across state lines, kidnapping free blacks and dragging them back into bondage. So when we whispered Cyrus's name in the darkness, it was with the assumption that we were speaking of the dead, honoring a man who had chosen death over slavery. Wrong we were. A cold November night it was, nearly a year after Cyrus's escape. When he returned, I was sleeping in the cabin I shared with 15 others when I was awakened by a hand over my mouth and a familiar voice whispering in my ear. "Quiet, boy. It's me." My eyes I opened to see Cyrus crouched beside my pallet, looking leaner and harder than I remembered, dressed in clothes I had never seen before. Good wool pants, a heavy coat, boots that actually fit. Like a different person he looked, like someone who had shed the skin of slavery and emerged as something new. "Cyrus," I whispered when he removed his hand from my mouth. "You're alive. You made it." "I made it," he confirmed, his voice barely audible. "All the way to Canada. A free man I am, Eli." Free. Strange in his mouth the word sounded, like a language he was still learning to speak. "Then why did you come back?" I asked, unable to comprehend why anyone would return to this hell after escaping it. Hardened his face. "Because my wife is still here. Ruth Drummond bought her 6 months ago from a plantation in Mississippi. I didn't know until I was already gone, but when I found out, I knew I had to come back for her." In disbelief I stared at him. Indeed, Ruth had arrived at our plantation earlier that year, a quiet woman in her 30s who kept to herself and spoke little of her past. That she was Cyrus's wife, I had not known. That Cyrus even had a wife, I had not known. "You're going to take her?" I asked. "Tonight," he said. "Something for me I need you to do, Eli. To the women's cabin I need you to go and tell Ruth to be ready. Tell her Cyrus has come for her. That can you do?" I nodded, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. Dangerous this was. If we were caught, we would both be killed. But intoxicating was the chance to be part of something like this, to help someone escape. Out of my cabin and across the yard to the women's quarters I crept. Dark was the night, the moon hidden behind clouds, and the only sound was the distant barking of dogs and the ever-present rumble of the forge. Inside I slipped and found Ruth sleeping near the door. Gently I shook her awake and whispered Cyrus's message. Wide with shock and disbelief her eyes went, then filled with tears. "I came back," she whispered. "For me he came back." "Ready to go you have to be," I said urgently. "Waiting he is." She nodded and quickly gathered her few possessions. A change of clothes, a small wooden cross, nothing more. Back outside together we crept, and to where Cyrus waited in the shadows near the tree line I led her. Silent but profound was the reunion between them. Without words they embraced, and I could see Ruth's shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Tightly Cyrus held her, his face pressed against her hair, and for a moment they were not slaves or fugitives, but simply a husband and wife, reunited after years of forced separation. "Thank you, Eli," Cyrus said, turning to me. "A brave boy you are. A brave man you're going to be. Take me with you," I blurted out, surprising myself. "Please, I want to be free, too." Gently Cyrus shook his head. "Not yet. Too young you are and too dangerous the journey is. But this I promise you, back I will come. Not just for you, but for all of you. The last time you'll see me, this is not. Again you're coming back?" I asked, incredulous. "As many times as it takes," he said, "until everyone I care about is free." That's my promise to you, Eli. Remember it." And then gone they were, melting into the darkness like ghosts, leaving me standing alone in the cold November night, with my heart racing and my mind reeling with the impossibility of what I had just witnessed. At dawn the alarm went up when Ruth's absence was discovered. Even greater than it had been when Cyrus first escaped was Drummond's rage. 2 slaves gone, both valuable, both vanished without a trace. 3 women from Ruth's cabin he had Pritchard whipped, demanding to know who had helped her escape. Nothing they knew or claimed to know nothing, and eventually Drummond gave up, though the fury never left his eyes. "Nothing," I said. My head down and my mouth shut I kept, but inside I was burning with a secret knowledge that felt like power. Cyrus had made it. Cyrus was free, and Cyrus was coming back. About it in the days that followed, the other slaves began to whisper. How had Ruth escaped? Who had helped her? Some suspected outside abolitionists. Others thought she had simply gotten lucky. But a few, the older ones, the ones who remembered Cyrus, began to wonder if perhaps the impossible had happened. What if he came back for her? Old Thomas whispered one night in our cabin. What if Cyrus made it north and then came back? Crazy that is, another man said. No one comes back. You get free, you stay free. You don't risk your neck coming back to this hell. But the truth I knew, and that Cyrus would return just as he had promised I knew. Right I was. 6 months later, in the spring of 1856, Cyrus returned again. This time for his brothers Marcus and Samuel he came, who had been purchased by Drummond the previous winter. The one who spotted him first I was, a shadow moving through the darkness near the forge. Carefully I approached, and when he saw me, he smiled. Back I told you I'd come, he said. Ready this time I was. I had been watching and learning, paying attention to the patrol routes and the guard schedules, preparing for the moment when Cyrus would return, and I could help him. Together, Marcus and Samuel we freed, and into the night I watched them disappear, 3 brothers reunited and heading toward freedom. And that was when I understood what Cyrus was doing. Not just rescuing his family, he was a legend he was building. That escape was possible. He was showing us that the masters were not all powerful, that an ally we had who would risk everything to bring us home. Our Moses Cyrus was becoming, leading his people out of bondage one soul at a time. And I was becoming his disciple, learning from him, preparing for the day when I too would make the journey north. But something else I was also becoming. Cyrus's eyes and ears on the plantation, his connection to those who remained behind, his partner in a campaign of liberation that would transform both of us and everyone we touched. Just beginning was the legend of Cyrus, and part of it I was going to be.